So I guess my story starts in 2010 when I met my partner Dozie. I had a very early loss. I didn't actually know I was pregnant at the time, and then had quite a big bleed and I hemorrhaged, and it was really difficult. So we decided to wait before we tried again. And then in 2013 I found out I was pregnant, and it was all exciting and it was really keen. And then I went for an early scan because I had a bit of bleeding, and I found out then that I'd had a miscarriage, and the baby hadn't grown past 6 weeks. So that was devastating. That was really hard. But then it took a while and we got over it. Well, not got over it, that's not really the right word. We got through it is more suited. And then in 2014, I found out I was pregnant again, and I was really anxious and things were hard. But then we got to 12 weeks, we did a 12-week scan, and I just thought, oh, we're good. This is going to be fine. No more fretting. And it'll be good. So we got to like 19, 20 weeks and I was just started getting loads of aches and pains and just not feeling right. The doctor kept telling me, oh, it's a urine infection, you've got this. So I had one urine infection and then just wasn't getting any better. The pain wasn't right. And at 21 weeks, I went to the hospital, and they didn't examine me. They just kind of told me I had SPD and sent me on my way. And then I called back to triage, and I'd had the show and I didn't know what it was at the time, so I was kind of panicking. Then when I got there, they examined me and told me that I was 5 centimetres gone. There was nothing they could do. So I then had to call Dozie and just sort of tell him, you're going to have to just leave work and come up because things aren't good. The midwife was like, oh, is there any chance of your dates being wrong? Could you be further? You know, if you're 24 weeks, we can try and help. And I was just like, no, 21 and 5, that's as far as we got. So I was in labour for 3 days, and they kept sort of saying, oh, your contractions are slow and you might be able to hold on. His heartbeat's really strong and stuff. Kept feeding me little bits of hope and then taking it right away again. So after 3 days, the consultant came and gave me a scan, and Joe was really low, and she was like, there's you're just holding on now, there's nothing we can do, like you're fully dilated, he's ready to come. So then Joe was born. The whole thing's it's still a blur, and I still pull on the negatives more really than the positives. Some days it's the other way around. But he was with us for 10 minutes. He had a cuddle with his dad, and then I just held him really until the end. It's really hard to say that because it still feels really surreal to me to say I held my son until he passed away. It's a hard thing, even to think about, never mind to say. I don't ever say it. I write it down, or it just never gets said really. So we then got to use the family room upstairs, and we spent time with Joel, and my family, my brother and my sister came and met him, and then we said goodbye, which was, I still find it hard to talk about. I always remember the midwife came and just kind of stood, and I just gave him a kiss and handed him over, and then I just had to leave. And now I look back now and I just wonder how I put one foot in front of the other and left. Like, and I did it again, and I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I done it. So we did his funeral, which was lovely and stuff, and then I got in contact with Sans after the funeral. and I met with you, and then from there I met Cecilia, and it was just a relief to meet someone who said that I wasn't alone, and this has happened before. I remember the first couple of days I got home from the hospital, I thought, oh my God, I'm the only person in this whole world that's held their baby until they've died. And I felt so alone. My midwife, and the midwife at the hospital had just sort of given me a leaflet for the Miscarriage Association, and then I was left. My friend Melanie had done a bit of volunteering with SANS, and she actually had said you should really get in touch with them. They do really good work, and that's when I done that. So then in June, I found out I was pregnant again, and I was so anxious. Like, it was hard because I say I was anxious, but it wasn't as bad as what was coming. I'd been to the consultant and stuff like that, and she was a bit, oh, this time will be fine, and you always like to think, it can't happen again. Like, there's no way it can happen again. And then it did happen again. My time with Lucas, the pregnancy was easy. I didn't have any urine infections, I didn't have any worries. I was fine. I was so I was healthy, I was good. And then at 20 weeks, I'd went for my scan, and they were supposed to check my cervical length, and they didn't. 5 days later, I just had this almighty pain, and I was like, I'll run a bath. It's probably just a bit of wind. I'm fine. And then the pain was just getting worse and worse. So I went along to my mum's because I'd left my blue notes at my mum's, and then we went up to the hospital, and I was made to wait for ages and ages, and I was like, the pain was getting worse, and I think I knew, but I just wanted to be like, no, it's not happening. It cannot happen again. So it's not. It's just wind. But there was I wouldn't even say 50-50. It was like, 1 minute I was going, it's fine, it's just wet. Other minute I'm going, no, it's not wind, it's worse. So I was examined about 3 hours later, and the doctor was like, she didn't even need to say anything. She looked I still see her face, and she looked at me and just went, I'm really sorry. I was like, I knew it. I knew it. And she told me I was about 5 centimetres dilated, and there's nothing they could do. So I was right back up to labour ward again, and that was 2 days I was in labour with Lucas, and I just was holding on. I just didn't want to do it again. I just wanted to try and it was like I was trying to make the time longer, because I knew he was going to come out and then he was going to die, and then that would be it. It would be another funeral. Anyway, so yeah, he was born, and then it was 45 minutes, and I just remember it was so bittersweet, because a lot of people just go, oh, how sad, like, so sad. But it was like he was born, and I remember putting my finger in his hand, and I'm grasping my hand, and I just remember being like, look, Mum, look. Like, it was like when anyone has a baby and they move it, and he was grabbing my hand. It was like that, but I just, at the end, I knew it was going to die. Like, do you know what I mean? It was like, so, look what he's doing, but it was going to be taken really quickly. Yeah, so that was really, really, really difficult. It's difficult anyway, but I don't want to take from anyone's loss and say one loss is hard and a second's harder. And I think it's a hard loss at any point, and it's many as you have. But to have a second, that shaded my world a lot more than it could the first time. I don't know. It was really hard. And then we did Lucas's funeral, and they told me it was incompetent cervix that I have. So there's no treatment. They can't diagnose it before. The only time they can diagnose an incompetent cervix is while it's happening. So they told me that next pregnancy there'll be a stitch and constant monitoring. So I got a new consultant, just Dr. Kirsty Dundas. She always puts a smile on my face whenever her name's mentioned, just because the support was outstanding. So when I found out I was pregnant again in December last year, I'm trying to think what year we're at. 2017, 2016, yeah, it would have been 2015, so second time in 1 year, just about. I met with Kirsty, and I don't know, I instantly seen her face and I just knew, like, she was just had such a, like, she just seemed, her whole demeanour was, I just knew she was kind, and I knew she knew how I was feeling and not how it is to go through it, because I don't know if she personally has been through a loss, but it felt like she knew. So she then told me that we'd have an early scan, and then at 13 weeks they'd place a cervical stitch. So the early scan, my 12-week scan, everything was fine, and then the stitch went in, and I was just an absolute wreck. I was looking back now, at the time I just thought I'm anxious, but looking back now, I was constantly on an anxious high. Like, I couldn't really eat, I couldn't go out for fear of something happening, any little pain, anything. I was like, but I didn't want to go to triage, because that's where it all happened. If I went there, this baby was going to die too, and that's the end of it. So I made one really anxious trip to triage at 21 weeks. And they did a scan, and thankfully everything was fine. So just over that 20 weeks to 24 weeks, I couldn't really go out in public. I just kind of spent all my time in my house and a little venture out to the garden and stuff like that. It was really hard. My mum, Sans, helped too. It was just trying to not to get myself in a muddle. Cecilia, she was a star. She always is though. She helped a lot in ways that she was like, I felt like that. I felt like I was losing my mind. I felt I was constantly, something was going to happen. This baby's going to die. I was going to get there. It was just constant. It was then she said that you had Jennifer Faulkner, and that she did meditation and taught you how to come down from the stress. So I met with her, I can't remember, roughly must have been about 22, 23 weeks pregnant, right where all my losses had sort of happened and just before the viability. And she taught me how to do just something so simple as how to breathe, and like just listening to the sounds around me. And I actually slept that night, and I didn't just close my eyes and rest. I actually had a proper sleep. And since I met her, even now, after the pregnancy, I have minutes where I go and I do what she taught me, and it's like a switch just goes and it calms me right down. So that helped me over that 24 weeks. I don't think I ever really came down from the high during Isaac's pregnancy. I just kind of settled in between 30 and 36 weeks. I was the most settled. Then I got to 36 weeks and I thought, okay, so it's getting too good to be true. Something's going to happen now. They took my stitch out. I had a section because my cervix wouldn't dilate. And they told me it was because there was scar tissue. But I just remember the consultant coming in saying, I'm really sorry, but we'll have to give you a section. And I was like, oh my God, can I have a minute? So they left, and then I had to ask my mum and Dozy to leave so I could just have a minute, because I felt my body, it's a hard one because one of these things, and people go, it's one of those things. But with Joel and Lucas, my cervix couldn't hold them in. And then when they took my stitch out and I wouldn't dilate, it's like he wouldn't let Isaac out. And I just was like, why couldn't they did that the first time? or the second time. But then I'm like, but then you wouldn't have Isaac. And it's hard because I'm like, I'm so grateful for Isaac. Like, he's amazing. And I wouldn't have him if it wasn't for his brothers. And I'll sometimes go, I wish that didn't happen, but I've got to pick myself up. Of course I wish my sons hadn't died, but I wouldn't be who I am now if it wasn't, and it's not just, I wouldn't be a sad person. I wouldn't be the loving, caring person that I am. I wouldn't be so patient. I wouldn't be so understanding with people. Like, I used to just be like, oh, someone died. Like, okay, everybody dies. But even to the point where I know, like, child loss is totally different from an adult dying, but I can level with people. Like, my granny's friends lost her husband, and I can see the pain in her eyes, and it's something that I would never have recognised before. And I can reach out to people, and they've left me with so much more, and I just don't want people to go, so sad. Yeah, I have days where I'm sad. Everybody has days where they're sad, but it's so much more. It's just a little tiny piece of like this massive jigsaw. Like, I'm easy to sit here today and go, yeah, this is how it is, and tomorrow I could be completely different. Like, yesterday was horrible. I just spent the whole day upset and going, oh, I'm getting married and my sons aren't going to be there, and people are moaning about not being able to sit next to each other, or they're moaning about, oh, what about these people coming to the ceremony? Why can't they come? I just think no amount of phone calls and shuffling tables and anything will get Joel and Lucas there. Nothing. And I can say that today and I feel alright, but yesterday it was just a lot of tears and a bit rubbish. Rubbish isn't the word, but how do you cover it? You can't, there's not a word. So yeah, anyway, I veered off a bit. So Isaac was born, he's now 6 months old. And he is happy, he's thriving, he's on solid food, and my worries never easing. Just now, in the beginning it was, okay, so he's out and he's safe, what now? I remember he choked a bit on his milk when we were feeding him in the hospital, and even though I just had a section, I'd never moved so fast, and the emergency button was pulled and he'd went a bit floppy. He's put under a heat lamp and stuff like that, and he was fine. He hadn't stopped breathing. But from there, it just kind of was like the first weeks before I could leave the house and stuff, like drive and whatever, it was Dozy would sit up the first part of the night until maybe 4 a.m. Then he would go to sleep and I would get up and he'd be sleeping, and he slept most of the time when he was little. Even I'd just watch him, and just as soon as babies hold their breath, it was something that I didn't know about until. And I was like, right, this is it. Now what do I do? Like, it was like I was constantly waiting for, like, phoning an ambulance, and that's it. He's stopped now. That's it. Come and get him. Working in a nursery, I've done first aid. And even like little things I remember saying to my mum, if he does stop breathing, I know what to do though, so that's fine. Like, I lived for knowing that I could help, because with Joel and Lucas, nobody helped. They just kind of were like, sorry. And like, it's hard because I don't like, not that I don't like talking about it, but it's really difficult to say. Like, I watched them sort of gasp for air. And like, Lucas was so, like, Joel, they said eventually was near 24 weeks. So they could have helped, but I can't live with this shoulda, coulda. But Lucas was so little, and you could see his heart go in, like, inside his rib cage, and I just, like, it's little things like that that stick with me. When if Isaac, like, gags on his food, I'm like, this is where the breathing stops. Is it going to be now? And it's just really difficult. So yeah, the early days were hard, but as its time is getting on, I never like to say I know he's here for good, because I can't say that. Anything can happen, but the days are easing and we're having fun and we're laughing, and I'm not constantly going, like making sure he's like alive, basically, or because even though it was my story is that they passed just after they were born and they were born before viability, I've heard a lot of stories, and I think I'm like, well, he's here, it could be SIDS, or it could be a choking accident, and it's something that I think all parents think about, but because it's been my reality, it feels like it's not if it might happen, it's when, or do you know what I mean? It's hard, but without your help, I don't think I'd have got through and keep getting through. I space my visits out to Cecilia now. They're not so regular, but when I do come, I just sit and go, and let it off, and then I go home and I can manage that extra amount of time. And I think in the early days, if someone had told me, you'll get through this, I'd just be like, whatever. And then I met you guys and you said, I've been through it and I'm through it. I kind of went, okay. And now that I'm not, there's no end, but I'm further into my journey, I can see that, yeah, you will be able to live with it, and the days will be hard, but they will be a lot further apart. I don't know. It's a nightmare, but it's not at the same time. It's so difficult to explain to someone who's never been there. Sans Lothians really, I can't stress enough how much they helped through. From the first phone call that I made to where I am now, I don't think, I say it a lot, but I don't think I would be standing with my head held high if it hadn't been for Sans. After Joel passed, we did his funeral, and I was kind of in a space where I was like, okay, I need to do something, but what? Like, I don't know anyone who's lost a baby. I know people who've had early losses, but I don't know anyone who's been through this. Like, not specifically this, but just a real baby. Do you know, it's hard to explain. So my friend Melanie said, you know, Sans Lothians, I've volunteered there. I've seen what they do. I know that they're good. I think that you'd benefit. So one day I remember I bit the bullet and I phoned a couple of times and I kind of just hung up. I was like, no, I'm not ready to do it. So when I made contact with Nicola and she talked about Theo, I knew then that the love for them wasn't going to just fizzle out and be left. And it's horrible to say because I don't want it to sound grim, but I don't want to sugarcoat the loss either. But I just felt like when I buried them and left them there in that cemetery, that's where everything was like. It was like I felt like I had to just and leave it there. And I can't talk about this, like babies and they don't die. But as soon as I made that initial contact with Sans Lothians, I realised that, okay, it's not the end. Like, it's not just your baby passes away and you're left there like a sitting duck. So after that phone call, we arranged to meet in person. And I always remember that Nicola came out and she held my hand and took me into the office. And it was just that I felt not like, it was weird, like I felt I was included in something, but not a nice thing to be included in, but yeah, it's full of people who understand. It's a hard one to explain when, again, it's like you're in a club. It's not a nice place to be, but if it's not a nice place to be, the people in it are making it better. So after that, Cecilia was introduced to me. And I just sort of remember sort of telling her a story and being like, and then I was like, oh yeah, she's been through it. Like, she understands too. And it was like, the more I came here, the more I was meeting people who, they didn't even need to say, I just seen it in their face and they understood. And then I heard Cecilia's story and I was like, okay, like, that's terrible. How did she get through that? And then I was like, she can do it, I can do it. And it's kind of like every time I came, there was that little shove, and not a shove, it's not, but it edged me in the right way, rather than, I feel if I hadn't made contact, it could have went one way or the other, and it could have went quite badly, but it didn't. So when I got pregnant again, Cecilia was really supportive, as was Nicola. I seen Cecilia a lot more regularly, and she told me that my worries were natural, and I was still early in my grief with Joel. And then when I got the news again, the first thing, I phoned Dozy, and then in turn my mum phoned my dad, and then I messaged Cecilia on Facebook. It was the first thing I did, and then she emailed me back. And over those 2 days while I was in labour, where and when I could, it was emails back and forth, and it was just, I think I deleted them out of my email because it was really stingy. It was hard to read over. But I just sort of remember being like, you can do it. You'll be okay. And I remember being like, no, I won't. But she kept reassuring me, and I think, had I not had SANS loadings as a cushion, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know what I would have done doing it again without any sort of support. So after he passed away, I remember speaking to Cecilia pretty soon after he was born. Again, I don't really remember what was said. I just really remember her just saying, there's nothing I can say. And then I hadn't cried at all after Lucas died. Not even a tear. And then I spoke to Cecilia, and it was like, I don't know, maybe to have the pain once and then to have it a second time, to then have someone who doesn't know what it feels like to say I'm sorry was kind of a kick in the teeth. But then to hear someone who knows that pain to say I'm sorry kind of like made it feel a little bit more real, and I was like, I'm going to have to do this again. The next day, I remember speaking to Nicola, and again, it was just kind of, I can't believe this is happening. And I just remember it being like, we'll get through it. Like, we'll help you through it. It's not the end, or it's not like we can get through. So after that, I was kind of like, the grief was plugged up, and I just kind of done what I think I did with Joel because that's what was expected. I wanted to run away, but that's not a thing for Lucas. It was nothing to do with Lucas. It was just because I was like, I'm in this situation again, not even, 6-7 months later. How is this happening? How? And then again, so Cecilia was really good in just, whenever you need a chat, phone me, email me, message me. She was like, I might not be able to answer the phone, but if I see you're calling, I'll call you back as soon as I can. Now, bearing in mind she's got Oscar at home, her own grief to deal with, and still she's ready to just be there and be like, it's fine. I was in a very, very dark place after Lucas died. And to have someone who is ready to just have their own life put on pause, even just for a phone call, and go, you're all right, it's fine, what's the matter? It's like, I want to say a light in the dark, but it's like a floodlight in the dark. It's like, if I didn't have her in those moments where I was like lying in bed going, you're a failure, you've done this is your fault, I don't know, I don't want to say anything drastic would happen, but I just, Cecilia's been a godsend to me. Take a breath. So then, when I found myself pregnant again, I was just like, I won't even get through 8 weeks. I won't get 12 weeks anyway, so it's fine. It's fine. It's never happening anyway. Cecilia was very like, I can understand why you're feeling like that, but it's fine, come on. Like, she was understanding and she knew why I was feeling like that, but I think because we'd gotten to know each other so well, she knew that I needed that, stop it, you're fine. And then all through that first early days, she was always there going, it's okay, it's fine, you feel like that. Mope if you want to mope, but remember, pick yourself back up. And then during the later stages when I had my losses, Nicola put me in contact with a lady called Jennifer Faulkner. And again, that was a relaxation coach, and it was something that I'd never thought of doing. It wasn't till Nicola said, oh, you should try this, you never know, like it might help. If not, we can try something else. We can do meditation classes, we can do this. There's something that'll help. It's not the end. Like it's not going to be an anxious time the whole time. You don't have to just sit in your room. There's ways to deal with this anxiety. So I met with her, and it was like instant. Like it was something that helped really, really quickly. And then later on, near the end of the pregnancy, I met with a doula that was again funded by Sans Lothians. And she just it was weird because it was like I'd never really been in contact now with people who hadn't lost. It was getting now that I'd met more people that had lost than hadn't. So to have a fresh set of eyes where she wasn't going, because I was thinking in ways that were, if I birth in this position, what if he gets stuck and he suffocates? Or what if so for someone to come in and say, no, you can do it like this, or she's like this, she was on my couch, like this, and I was sitting there going, she's so blasé about this. Like, I was like, my plan was to just lie there and as still as I could until he was out and he was safe. But she was like, you can go on your side, you can do this, there's a ball, there's a special seat, what about this? And I was like, I needed that fresh set of eyes to say, there's other ways, and you can take this and you can make it positive for you rather than it just being this horrible experience. So I was really grateful to be given these opportunities, whereas if I hadn't made contact and I hadn't done what I'd done, I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't have that support. I wouldn't have friends now. I wouldn't have a lot of stuff if it wasn't for the girls at Sans Lothians. I wouldn't be half the person I am. So I'm grateful. Grateful's not even the word. Like, I could sit here and go, oh my God, they do this amazing stuff, but it doesn't cover it. I wish no one had to use the service or use you guys at all, but I'm so glad you're here, because I never want any of my family to go for it, but if my sister ever found herself in the position, my cousins, any of my friends, it's a kind of there's that support there, they'll get through it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a comfort, you know. Yeah.